mythologies like Ramayana and Mahabharata, the main reason why war took place is because of the humiliation that was involved. Look at the speech that Osama bin Laden gave after attack on Twin Towers. He says, what you are experiencing is the humiliation our group has failed for last 80 years. Look at genocide study. It is not an act that is done a fit of rage. It is very much systematic, cold-blooded, planned extermination of a particular section of people. How people can treat other people in such an inhuman way, what does it mean to be an Indian? BJP has a different take on it. Congress has a different take on it. BSP has a different take on it. Do we really agree on the idea of India?
So hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Baithak, and in today's episode we have with us Professor Yashpal Jogdand, a social psychologist who's also a faculty member at IIT Delhi. And with him we discuss about different topics such as the Stanford prison experiment. We talk about the role of stereotypes, the role of humiliation in society. We talk about how social media affects our generation and the generations to come. And we discuss about the different research work that the professor is doing. So without wasting any time, let's start today's battle. So to start off, let's talk about the Stanford prison experiment. We've been reading about that, and first of all, I want you, if you can brief the audience who doesn't know what Stanford prison experiment was, if you can brief about that a bit, and then maybe you can give your opinion about the different dynamics that happened in that experiment, and what do you think about that experiment?
Okay, so Stanford prison experiment, as the name suggests, is a social psychology experiment conducted at the Stanford University by Philip Zimbardo and his colleagues. So basically, this is one of the classic studies in social psychology which has tried to answer questions about the nature of the evil, how good people are transformed into monsters, and is trying to understand how, broadly speaking, how the tyrannical regimes, the authoritarian rules actually function, because even evil is done by people like us. So how is that transformation possible? How good people turn evil? That is the primary question that this study tried to address. And the study involved uh, assigning normal students, individuals, healthy, normal individuals to two categories of prison and guards. And a simulated prison was created in the psychology, in the basically psychology laboratory of the Stanford University. And then over the course of the days, it was observed what sort of a dynamic emerges between the group of prisoners and the group of guards, and what are its consequences. So the study was initially planned to last at least for 10 days, but it had to cut short because it was observed that the participants in the guard group turned violent, and then things were actually getting out of hand. And this has been a very, I think, dramatized. The study has been dramatized and made into a number of films.
Yeah,
I have watched at least one or two films which are basically based on this. But this research has provided an explanation, a social psychological explanation for something like what has really happened in Abu Ghraib, when Muslim prisoners were humiliated, Muslim prisoners were mistreated. Um, so this has been the broader outline of the study.
yeah.
Now, to talk about the precise social psychological dynamic that has taken place when participants and people like me and you are assigned to roles of prisoners and guards, what exactly happened? And that is the major issue here. The explanation, according to Zimbardo, is that one of the things that happens, and one also needs to understand what was the position against which Zimbardo was arguing.
Hmm.
The position was that evil is committed by evil people.
Yeah.
Bad people do bad things. So in a way, what it has been happening was that you attribute the source of evil to the individual's personality, to the individual's makeup, to individual's thought patterns, and so on. The argument that Zimbardo and also other social psychologists around that time were trying to make is that it also has something to do with the situation in which people find themselves.
Hmm.
So maybe, I think, and this is a broad argument social psychology has made, maybe there is a power in the situation through which people get transformed. The relations between people get transformed. People's thinking and behavior gets affected. So the study was a demonstration for that argument that there is a power in the situation that we need to understand. And by creating a simulated prison, a system of tyranny, and assigning normal individuals to these different groups and creating a sort of a hierarchy and unequal power relation between them, they show that the people who are more powerful in certain in these sort of system and how and play that sort of an authoritarian role, in fact descend into those sort of roles, and they because of that role that they have to perform in that given situation, they get transformed. So this was a precisely a role-based explanation, and we all play different roles in the society. When I'm speaking to you, I'm playing a kind of a role of an expert as a social psychologist, as a faculty, uh, so on. So roles are definitely important, and sociologists have talked a lot about it. But that was the precise explanation that Zimbardo gave. Now, coming to the critical part, now we need to ask questions about role. What is the meaning of the role? Why do roles matter to people? And most importantly, now, if you look around, we are living in a we're very much in the scientific community is very much influenced by the initiative for open science, where you will need to share data, you will need to declare what were your hypotheses, what sort of procedures and methods that you used.
Yeah.
And strangely, if you go and dig further up on Stanford prison experiments, you won't find any journal papers in high impact journals. You don't find that sort of a systematic uh, output out there in the literature. You'll find, and despite that, the study has been such a big hit, as it has been so popular, and it has become a kind of a staple example in
Yeah.
psychology textbook, and has, of course, is been very popular uh, in social media and in other contexts. But when you think critically about Stanford prison experiment, and especially the way it tries to understand human behavior and tries to explain human behavior, especially uh, the negative human behavior, one of the issues is the explanation on the basis of roles, uh, because it doesn't really clarify the dynamic in an efficient way. The role still is played by individuals, is assigned in a situation, but it's not just roles that is important in a situation.
Hmm.
It is as if people don't have any agency and choice in whether and how to perform a particular role. There is a
Yeah.
role that a student is supposed to play in a classroom, but how efficiently or how qualitatively that role is going to be played out is dependent on people, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
need to dig further up and try and understand what exactly happens in that situation.
Hmm.
So the studies, which so there is another set of studies that we also should be aware of. It's called as BBC Prison Study.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so basically, this was an attempt of the replication of the Stanford prison experiment. where the same sort of a method was used, assigning normal, healthy individuals to groups of prisoners and guards. And if you look at the outcomes of that research conducted by Alex Haslam and Stephen Reicher, and it's been all out there. You could just Google bbcprisonstudy.com. You will find a plethora of scientific literature published by these researchers show communicating the results from this study. And what they explained on the basis of what is called as social identity, which I'll explain and which I'll come to later, uh, is that it's basically what you need to understand is the very process of mobilization that has taken place in the Stanford prison experiment. So there is now archival data available from what exactly happened, and Zimbardo has already filled in that. There is a documentary quite rich about that. So no material is out there. So if you look at the material deeply, you see that the way Zimbardo gave instruction to the group of guard, he said, we need to create boredom among prisoners. We need to create that. We need to create this. We need to treat them in this way. So when you say we, then you have created a very different situation for people. Then Zimbardo himself plays there a role of a leader, whereas prisoners are the followers. So what is happening can also be explained in terms of the dynamic of leaders and followers. So Haslam and Reicher view what is called as an account of engaged followership in the Stanford prison experiments, and they explain the tyrannical behavior and in the unequal prison system that was artificially created on the basis of the followership, that these participants followed the leadership uh, of Zimbardo, and that was one of the ways participants were influenced to do something that they normatively do not consider uh, uh, how they would behave or how they would think in other circumstances. So this is in nutshell what Stanford prison experiment is about, but it does raise, of course, a few months back, all the archival material about Stanford prison experiment was made available, and then there was again a big debate and discussion between Zimbardo, Haslam, Reicher, and again, it was also joined by Janji Bevel from New York University. And just then you see that even the new analysis that is now published in American Psychologist attest to the engaged followership account of what happened in the Stanford prison experiment. And of course, so uh, I think we need to revise our popular understanding of what exactly is the outcome of Stanford prison experiment and how do we understand it.
Yeah. But then what about personalities, like their individual personalities? Like, how does that come into play when we say leadership and followers?
Yeah. So of course, but what exactly is leadership and followership about? Is it when we say, see, and you use the term leadership.
Yeah.
Is leadership same as leaders? Leader is the one who is performing leadership.
Yeah.
Leader is the person who embodies the role or the function of being a representative of a particular cause or a group. Whereas leadership is a process, isn't it? It's a process by which the leader exert influence on the group. So yes, there are individual level, personality level factors that influence the process of leadership, that influence our thinking and behavior. But to what extent? That we need to decide. So if they play a major role or if they play a minor role, that we'll need to decide and then base our explanation. My position is that yes, personalities are important, but at the same time, when you look at the situation, something like when you look at a system of tyranny and how people get influenced and how people follow toxic authorities and so on, you need an explanation that takes into account these group level factors such as social influence, such as leadership processes, followership, and so on, rather than the intra-psychic factors or intra-individual factors.
Hmm.
So you need to create, I think what I'm saying is that we need to have a parsimonious explanation for this complex thinking and behavior. And I'm saying that this should be pitched at the right level, which is the level of the group and not of the individual.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I'm not negating the influence of individual level factors, of course.
Hmm.
They are important. But how influential, that we need to critically understand.
So the power of situation was in play at the Stanford prison experiment, right? So can we say that a personality of a person, uh, maybe for taking any particular decision, can we say that it's because of the situations that have occurred in his life throughout his childhood that has somehow shaped him, and now that is his personality?
See, again, when you are saying that the personality is shaped by the childhood journey and development sort of a journey and so on. Again, what we are trying to understand in this is the relationship between society and individual,
Hmm.
isn't it? That
Yes.
how, as an individual, my personality is shaped by the circumstance in which I found myself.
Yes.
So personality is something that is not an abstract entity that I have developed within myself, but it is very much part of the context I found myself in.
Hmm.
Okay. So even while understanding personality, we'll need to understand the context in which it was developed. So when you explain something like genocide, something like prejudice, something like tyranny, something like authoritarian rules, or some these sort of order historical contextual factors, we need to take context into account and then account its influence on people's personalities and choices and so on. It shouldn't be always the other way around,
Hmm.
that starting from people's personality and then saying that, okay, these people's personalities have impacted upon the context. I think we shouldn't be taking this to any extreme, but try and understand the
Yeah.
interaction between.
It's kind of two-way process, right?
Yes, it's kind of a two-way process where people interact with their environment and develop their sense of who they are, and then that's how their thinking and behavior is influenced.
Hmm.
But explaining this on the basis of intra-individual factors uh, amounts to what social psychologists has called as fundamental attribution error. That while attributing causes of particular incidences like this, we are trying to understand it on the basis of dispositional factors, on the basis of factors that are within the individuals, rather than the factors that are contextual, that are social, and how they have influenced this particular individual's choices.
Okay, sir. So my question is about stereotypes. So in general, हम जब भी society को देखते हैं तो every group has some stereotypes attached to it. So
Yeah.
I just want to know that how important are these stereotypes when we talk about a group, yeah, when we form a group.
See, of course, stereotypes are really important in the way we think about the groups, in the way we think about various people belonging to particular groups. So, of course, they are important in the way because, uh, and this is an explanation that cognitive psychologist has often given, uh, which is which is a bit problematic. We'll come to that problematic part later. But the explanation given is in terms of minimizing the cognitive cost of thinking about other people. Like, if you want to understand what, say, Japanese people are like, are you going to go to every Japanese and ask and talk to them and then form your opinion based on your interaction with each and every individual of that group?
No.
That doesn't seem to be very smart and doesn't seem to be even functional.
Yeah.
So what you do is that you rely on what other people are saying about that, how that group is generally understood, what are the generalized beliefs about how Japanese are like vis-a-vis, and then that's how we create some sort of a generalization, which in a way help us minimize the cognitive load that is involved in making sense of other people. That is one of the positions that uh, that this position from cognitive psychology says, that we are in effect cognitive misers, and we try to find ways and means to find shortcuts and try and make sense of the world in a much simpler and efficient way. And stereotypes particularly help us with that. So they help us with this enormous amount of information that is out there in the environment, and just tell us about how we process information about different aspects. So stereotypes, in a sense, uh, help us simplify our lives. So of course they are very important, and we have stereotypes about so many things, not just about people, but also about places. And
Yeah.
the stereotypes are either positive or negative, or sometimes also ambivalent. Uh, so there are many positive stereotypes about, say, certain sports team, that they are really good. They have a good killer instinct. Then there are also some sort of a negative stereotype type about a particular sports team, that yeah, they are talented, but they lack the effort, something like that. So what happens is that the process of stereotyping becomes very important here. That while interacting with individuals from other groups, you in a way develop understanding about that person based on their membership in a particular group.
Group. Yeah.
For example, I often give this example uh, about taking rickshaws in different cities, and we have a certain stereotypes about how rickshawalas behave and think.
Yeah.
So taking rickshaw in Delhi is a weird experience, because nobody is going to switch on meter for you. It's not like, say, in Bangalore or in Mumbai, where they don't ask you anything. By baitho chalo, meter dalo, niklo. But that doesn't happen in Delhi. You have to negotiate, and you also have to be very clever, because Delhi is a big city. They can take you through so many hoops and loops, and
Yeah.
you don't know where you will end up. So you have to be smart.
Yeah.
So the kind of attitude that you generate towards rickshawalas in general uh, is based on the kind of a stereotyping that we do.
Hmm.
We Even if we, and there are many honest, hardworking, uh, and very smart rickshawalas that I have met, uh, who often, I think it's always a joy to discuss politics with while you are traveling in rickshaw, and you get to hear so many uh,
Yeah.
kind of a grassroots opinions and understanding, and
Yeah.
they discourse about how this country is doing. It's not about relying on elite discourses that you read every day on Twitter feed or in newspapers or here in newsrooms and so on. So it's a very different take, but the way you think about a person simply because they belong to particular category is what stereotyping is about. And then that process can have positive and negative implications for people. For example, uh, if you look at uh, the kind of stereotypes people have about something like caste, something like gender, uh, uh, you see that the stereotypes play such a powerful role in impacting upon
Yeah.
people's imagination and ability to perform certain tasks.
Yes.
So a popular stereotype that is there out there is women can't drive well, they can't do
Mm.
very well in maths. So
Mm.
where does this sort of a stereotype come from? And also, broadly speaking, I think in the field of science, technology, engineering, maths, women's representation is low. Why is that? Because traditionally, the stereotype is that women won't be able to do well in these fields, and that stereotype affects doesn't matter what sort of ability you have,
Hmm.
because the stereotype a, is a structural element. It is out there. It is the
Yeah.
way people think and act and the way people understand who you are. And in a way, you are constrained by other people's understanding of you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I am as a faculty, as an intellectual, or as a person, how good I am or how efficient I am. But my understanding or my social image is very much constrained by where I come from,
Mm.
what sort of category I belong to. And I think that is what entails the power of stereotype, or if you would like, the power of stereotyping. And if if you look at the way minority members of minority groups like Dalits, Muslim, women in underrepresented fields, and other minorities from other contexts, you see that minority group members are seriously affected by different stereotypes people have about them. So there is a widespread stereotype about intellectual inferiority of Dalits and Blacks uh, or African Americans in US, and that the stereotype of intellectual inferiority affects people while performing uh, intellectual tasks. So there's
Hmm.
a great deal of research on what is called a stereotype effect by Stille and colleagues, Cloud Stille and colleagues. And what stereotype effects tells you is a minority group members worries or concerns about fulfilled, about in a way confirming the negative stereotypes about their group.
Hmm.
Mm.
So people say, just to put it in a more simpler terms,
Yeah.
लोग कहते हैं that कि तुम मैथ नहीं कर पाओगे. Doesn't matter how well you prepare, but when you find yourself in a situation where your maths ability is going to be tested, your performance gets affected. So
Mm.
we were talking about power of the situation. This is also power of the
Yeah.
situation
Yeah.
from a different lens, because the power is exerted through stereotypes.
Stereotypes. Yeah.
That the negative stereotypes in a way affect the way you would normally behave and normally perform in this sort of exam situation. So that is how we need to pay attention to different stereotypes. And sometimes we also need to be aware that even positive stereotypes about minority groups can have negative implications.
Uh, if you can give
So
an example,
African
like.
American people are good at sports, good at basketball.
Mm.
Hmm.
How is the race of a person gets linked to sports performance?
Hmm. Hmm.
How is that sort of a relationship is linked? Hmm? Then uh, I'm reading a very fascinating research by Anna Dobai and Nick Hopkins on uh, uh, a Central European minority called as Roma. And there is this widespread stereotype about Roma is that these people are very good in music. They have such a musical talent in them. And this is a positive stereotype. But they
Yeah.
show through a very systematic analysis of interviews with Roma group members that even this positive stereotype is experienced negatively because it constrains the
Yeah,
ability
exactly.
of
Yeah.
Roma people to act on their terms, because the terms of their behavior and their in everyday engagement is set by what majority community expects them to do,
Hmm.
or expect them to be good at. So that is why I think paying attention to stereotypes is very important. Stereotypes are contextual. They're based, they change. Of course, they change. And one of the very important debates in social psychology has been about how much stereotypes are linked to social reality. Do they reflect social reality?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because in a way, you are making an erroneous sort of a social judgment about people,
Yeah.
a kind of a generalized belief about a group of people. How true is that? And there is all sort of research that has been going on for quite a few decades. And so there is one position that I have outlined earlier, which is looking at how people are in fact cognitive misers, and that is why they use stereotypes. And in a way, stereotypes is a sort of a is bad, but it's sort of a compulsion. How are we
Yeah.
going to function without?
Yeah.
But that position is very well contested and criticized by other set of researchers who say that the issue is not that there is so much information in our everyday environment that we need to attend to such an enormous amount of information. The point is that despite having so much information, we select what is more important and still able to think and act in a more systematic manner.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we select, we focus, and so the social reality, the way it is understood through the stereotype, is that the other set of researchers argue that maybe stereotypes tell you a lot about how power relations between people are structured.
Hmm.
Maybe they are truthful in terms of telling you the kind of inequality that exists in the system, and that information about the inequality, that information about the power may help people undertake right action at the right moment. So there is this book by Haslam Oak and Turner,
Hmm.
Stereotyping and Social Reality, and the book has a very nice cover. The cover has a photo of protesters sitting there. That is from poll tax riots in Britain in
Hmm.
1980s. Protesters are sitting there, and you see that the policemen with their riot gear are
Hmm.
charging at these protesters. And uh, these authors ask this question: imagine yourself in the position of those protesters. Are you going to evaluate every policeman individually and think about them as individuals?
No.
No, you are going to think of them as policemen who are charging at us versus them. So
Yeah.
what they are saying, that stereotypes help you develop this understanding about us versus them, which is an important understanding about making sense of the social world. And that is the most appropriate way you understand that particular situation.
Yes.
So it is not that we lack a capacity to handle a load of information.
Hmm.
Uh, we are certainly not cognitive misers, but we select, we understand, we act purposefully, we think purposefully, And that is where I think the explanation needs to go as far as uh, issues like stereotype and stereotyping is concerned.
Indeed.
So, moving on from here, we were reading about your research interests, and one thing which was quite intriguing was political rhetoric. So
Yeah,
we searched upon ki kya hai political rhetoric, what is it, all of that,
yeah,
and then we found out it's about politicians through their speeches trying to influence the mass, right,
yes,
in
yes.
a certain way. So to about that only, and expanding it to other things as well, just say for example, not just politicians selling his idea, but even large corporations selling their products through advertisements and different mediums. uh, like, what say do we have in making any type of decision, any type of choice when we come across such things, such situations? Because there are very many smart people behind the scenes, right, who are devising that speech, or who are devising that particular advertisement. They are also thinking about what color they should use so that it impacts our brain in a certain way. So, like, how much say do we have after these people doing all these things?
Yeah. So basically, the issue is about creating social influence.
Hmm.
And uh, when one looks at the kind of processes that people engage in an everyday conversation, it's about convincing others, it's about debating, it's about disagreeing. Mm. So conversations between people, discussions between people, you read something, you watch something, you uh, talk about something. This is involved. A position and a counter position is always involved.
Yeah.
A key argument that was made by a social scientist and a social psychologist, Michael Behe, was that in fact, it's not just out there that we argue and debate about certain things, but it is also the way we talk to ourselves.
Hmm.
Okay.
He has written a book called as Arguing and Thinking. And one of the key arguments that he has made in the book is that even our thinking reflects this sort of a argument and counter argument structure. We often debate and fight with ourselves. We, in a way, try to convince ourselves in different ways, isn't it? So the process is not just out there that these political actors or different other technological entities or financial entities are trying to lure us to do this and lure us to do that. But we are also engaging us in a sort of a debate about what position to take about different controversial matters, like
Yes.
something like abortion, something like caste-based reservations, something like, say, how should we treat women? All these are controversial matters. People have different positions on it, isn't it? So
Yes.
Billy asked a very interesting question in the book. He asked, suppose I were to ask you, what is your position about Earth being flat or round?
Hmm. We'll instantly say it's
You
round.
have a position.
Yeah.
You may not have a position because that's no longer a matter of debate,
Yeah.
except for people like Sherlock Holmes, who are not really bothered about all these things. All of us are aware that Earth is round and Sun revolves around it. So, uh, so it's clear that the matters which are disputed, contested, people take different positions on that. People develop what is called as attitude, favorable, unfavorable position towards these matters which are not settled. And if you look at it, there are so many matters which are not settled and never settled. They're never settled. Take, for example, what does it mean to be an Indian?
Hmm.
BJP has a different take on it.
Yeah.
Congress has a different take on it. You ask BSP, it has a different take on it.
Yes.
You ask other intellectual, they have a different take on it. Do we really agree on the idea of India? Although we may call ourselves Indian,
Indians.
firstly and lastly. So, be it your decision about purchasing, say, next set of smartphone, or purchasing curtains, or maybe voting for two political parties, or maybe taking a position on some ongoing protest like farmers protest or something like that, you are always swayed by different sides. What you listen to, what you choose, how you choose is the matter of investigation here. That how you make that decision, how you influence, how you get influenced. And there is no one way that people get influenced. There are multiple ways people get influenced. At the same time, there are multiple ways people are influenced by different actors.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is to focus on these variety of ways people are engaged, people are mobilized, people are influenced, people are convinced, and in a way made to think and act about particular issue in a particular manner. So these processes of social influence, as it is called in social psychology, are of paramount importance.
Mm.
The critical departure that I'm uh, I make in my own work uh, is that the kind of positions we take are not intrapsychically decided. They are not only cognitive in nature. I have an attitude about, say, certain thing. I have attitude about, say, students, a certain section of students. Suppose, is that how? Is that the attitude derived from the way I cognitively thought, understood, or in a way process the information about different students, and then made a decision? Okay, these bunch of students are good. These bunch of students are bad. It is also about what people say about particular students,
Yeah.
isn't it? It is also about my opinion about a particular social group is also influenced by what other people say about it. And the same happens in IIT system. We know that that students take courses from humanities and social sciences, and I'm not sure how the culture is there in IIT Bombay, but in IIT Delhi, these courses are called as hookah courses. So hookah is really a denigrating term that I feel as a humanities and social science faculty, it's kind of a very bad stereotype.
Yeah.
Hookah courses, that these professors are chill ones. They just like to talk a lot. They philosophize. They talk about big things, and so on. Which in a way shows that students uh, develop these sort of understanding about particular set of courses, particular set of professors. So you see the stereotyping playing a role, but at the same time, you see how students choose courses. What I have observed, I have been working here for last 3-4 years, and I see that students get affected by what other students say about particular professor.
Course, yeah.
नहीं
Yes.
नहीं
Very
उसका
much.
कोर्स करो, उसका कोर्स एकदम अल्टीमेट. साइकोलॉजी करना है उसका कोर्स करो. इकोनॉमिक्स करना है, इकोनॉमिक्स कोर्सेस आर ऑलवेज वैल्यूड, ऑलवेज सॉट आफ्टर. काम में आएगा, इधर जाओ या उधर जाओ. हाँ? We have linguistics. Linguistics course is also sought after. So students make these choices not individually, intrapsychically, but also by taking into account what other people say about this.
Yeah.
And on a very and kind of on a surface level, I'll just introduce two terms which social psychologists have talked about, is the kinds of social influence that are at play. First type of social influence is called as normative social influence, which is in a way your desire to fit in the group, your desire to be accepted by the group. You don't want to be in a way seen doing something that is considered, say, not fit.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want that. People, we value social connection. I think we're talking in pandemic, so we should know better that social connection is of paramount importance. Second sort of information is called as informational social influence, which is about maybe other people know things that I don't know. Maybe I should listen to them.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know the ultimate reality.
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't done any humanities social sciences courses. So if my senior says, कि चलो इसी दिशा में जाना है, बस इसी दिशा में जाना है. That's how we make our opinion, isn't it?
Yes.
So maybe what we need to consider while also thinking about how people get influenced by different politicians, different financial and technological entities, is by looking at these processes of social influence, how the influence was created. And one of the strategies is based on what is called as social identity. Social identity is a very important, a critical analytic term which helps you understand that people do not just have their individual selves. While we all are individuals and have the personalities that we were referring to earlier, at the same time, we are also members of numerous social groups
Society.
around us. And all those
Yeah.
group membership matter to us, isn't it?
Yes.
Being Indian matters to us. I'm from Maharashtra. Being Marathi matters to me. I like Marathi literature a lot. I read a lot Marathi, and I hope to write a Marathi book one day. Huh? That's how much it matters to me. Then we like to support different teams.
Yeah.
I like supporting Tottenham Hotspur. I like Indian cricket team sometimes when it is doing things in the right way. Okay, so we are all members of social groups, and we derive our understanding about ourselves. We derive recognition. We feel good about belonging to certain groups, but we also feel in a way constrained and in a way disadvantaged by belonging to particular social groups which are out of our country. Belonging to, say, a minority group is threatening. So one has to understand this element of social identity in the processes of mobilization. And one of the things, one of the strategies that, especially since you mentioned political rhetoric, is dependent on, is creating this shared sense of us. Who are we? Is a question that is always open for discussion, debate, and conversation.
Yeah.
We Indians should do this and should do that. So when you say we Indians, it appeals to people, uh, those who consider themselves Indians. And then it's not just about the boundaries between who are Indians and who are not Indians. It is also about what it means to be an Indian. That meaning is also created then and there in the political data. So you listen to any political leader speech, they may be referring to the same things, but not in the same way. The meanings will be wildly different. That is why one of the ways we study political rhetoric is analyzing speeches by looking at how leaders have created a sense of us and a sense of not taking the meanings of this us and us for granted in a particular place and in a particular setting. That is how we look at it.
Okay, sir, so you mentioned a term called social influence. So I was watching this documentary by the name The Social Dilemma. तो उसमें एक सीन था या एक सेक्शन था जिसमें अ गर्ल, अ 14 ईयर और 15 ईयर ओल्ड गर्ल, she makes an account on the social media platform Instagram and she posts something. और उसके बाद ऐसे होता है कि उसको जैसे लाइक्स मिलते हैं, सो शी गेट्स हैप्पी, एंड इफ समवन हेट कमेंट्स ऑन इट, so she starts feeling inferior and she gets aggressive. She starts behaving aggressively with her parents as well. So I want to know that how is this social media changing us? ये पूरा जो सोशल इन्फ्लुएंस का बाजार लगा है, या ये सोशल मीडिया जो अभी, लाइक वी आर द फर्स्ट जनरेशन टू यूज सोशल मीडिया राइट नाउ, तो इसके
That's
बाद की जनरेशन पे क्या इफेक्ट पड़ेगा सोशल मीडिया का? आई वांट टू नो दैट.
okay. So basically, as you have said, that ours is the first generation that is using social media,
Yeah.
and I think we are still in the process of understanding uh, its implications for our thinking and behavior. And there's so much research that is going on. And I have a PhD student who has recently started working on social media and political participation.
Mm.
And we are considering this question in a much deeper way. Uh, so I don't have anything very specific uh, in terms of research about this. But what I can think about now is the way social media has facilitated the spread of information.
Yeah.
Mm.
So in the earlier times, the public exposure of a particular event or a particular happening, a particular viewpoint, would take some time, would happen, but would happen in a much slower space. But with the various outlets of social media at our disposal, along with the smartphone and the technology they have created, has made it so easy for us to to spread the information and to influence each other.
Yeah.
And this had both uh, disruptive as well as non-disruptive, in a way, constructive implications. Constructive implications, see, as social beings, we have been very much influenced, and we get very much influenced by what other people say, how other people think, and that is what we were talking about. But with social media, the the speed is now uh, different. The medium, the extent of the exposure is also different. You tweet something, you don't know how it is going to go.
Yeah.
So I read about an incident. A women CEO of white women, excuse me, a white woman was going to Africa on certain business purpose for certain business meeting or something like that. And while she was boarding her plane, she tweeted something like, "I'm going to Africa. Uh, uh, I'm going to stay there, but I hope I don't get AIDS," something like that. A very, very derogatory comment about Africa and the extent of AIDS that is there.
Yeah.
That tweet was retweeted as it happens and became viral. That women boarded the plane, she had no idea what had happened. In her personal capacity, she just tweeted about something racist, something derogatory about African people, and she boarded the plane. She, the flight was going to take some like 14, 15 hours to reach to the destination. By the time she reached, had she landed, had become a big hashtag on Twitter. And by the time she landed, she was handed over termination from her company. So you see that sort of a dramatic effect that is created by social media.
Yeah.
and that also showcases a, in a way, both good and bad that can come out of social media. Good in a way that it shows people's support for
Yeah.
anti-racism, solidarity with the values of equality, values of fraternity, that it is not something that is tolerable, acceptable. You shouldn't be saying this out loud in the public. And in fact, you shouldn't also believing this uh, in your life as well. So something, so this shows the power of social media in shaping our lives, and the way I think the way the social media is growing and the way we are getting habituated to it. I think the documentary that you mentioned, Social Dilemma,
Dilemma.
showcases the kind of addictive impact that social media can have on your minds, on your brains, and that sort of addiction is serious.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, I would also like to highlight the good that can come out of it. And you are students of technology, I guess. So I think you understand the technology can be a two-edged sword, that it can it can do much good,
Yeah.
breaking the item. So much good can come out of it. But we can also build, and we have built atom bombs and destroyed people. Uh, so that's the way I think to think about social media. But I would like to emphasize the way social media is now, in a way, affecting political participation among people. Is that, however small a protest these days, it creates its own handle on Twitter, it creates a hashtag, and as
Yes.
it grows, people's support grows for it. And one of the examples that we are seeing in front of our eyes is farmers protest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tweets by one by a pop star, another by an environmental activist, and made that issue international. It spiraled into a big thing. So that's sort of an amplifying effect we can expect happening, and might turn out to be a good thing under certain situations. But at the same time, you also see a sort of regressive impact of social media in terms of people's freedom of expression. That you tweet something, might be well-meaning, might be an independent opinion you have about the way government is functioning, you may be penalized for it. So there are so many sedition cases that are going on
Yes.
just because somebody tweeted something, somebody wrote something on Facebook, and so on. So yes, we should be careful what we say in public, but we should also have our rights and civil liberties protect when we say something in public, and that is what democracy is about. It is about critical thinking. It is about dissent. It is not about obedience, conformity, and compliance. So that is why understanding social media is going to shape uh, not only what is going to happen to the future generation, also what is going to happen to this country and the world.
I guess we are coming to the last section of our talk today, and we want to, we want you to share about the researches that you're doing currently.
Okay, so uh, I'm a social psychologist.
Yeah.
That's how I would like to define myself, because I'm fundamentally interested in uh, how we are shaped by the circumstance that we find ourselves, how we are shaped by situations, how we are influenced by other people. Uh, but as I have told you earlier, it's not just the one-way street. We also have the power and agency to affect the situations. And this is very much clear by the leaders, the great leaders that we had. uh, in the past few generations. Uh, uh, People like Ambedkar, people like Gandhi, people like Nehru, and other, I think the whole generation of the freedom fighters that we had uh, contributed uh, to shaping of this of the of the condition that we live in, and in a way help us imagine a different way of living. So primarily my interest is about how do people negotiate their membership in disadvantaged groups. What happens when you are part of a group that is stereotyped negatively, uh, it is discriminated, uh, it is excluded? What happens? How do people deal with that sort of a discrimination, that sort of an exclusion, uh, simply because they happen to be member of a particular group? And this question goes much beyond that. It is not just that people are treated badly in everyday life because of their group membership, but if you look at uh, genocide, you see that, especially you look at uh, what happened in the Holocaust, and that, I think Holocaust played uh, a big role in shaping social psychology in the post-war period, bringing forth this question of why groups matter and why group membership matter to people. It brought forth the question that how come 6 million people were killed, exterminated, systematically exterminated. It's not just kind of a killing people. If you look at genocide studies, you will find that it is not an act that is done in a fit of rage or something like that.
Yeah,
It is very much systematic,
systematic.
cold-blooded, planned extermination of a particular section of people. How is that possible? Where does the motivation uh, uh, for some for that sort of action come from? How people can treat other people in such an inhuman way simply because they happen to be part of some other group that they don't like? And this is a key question that motivates my research. The way I started looking at the experience of humiliation in the lives of Dalits, the people who are ill-treated on the basis of their membership in previously untouchable caste. And the experience of humiliation is very important in the way various everyday interactions are made sense of, in the way the power relationship is understood, in the way the resistance is imagined. But if you look at the literature on humiliation, especially the psychological literature on humiliation, it tells you that humiliation is a big part of events like wars, genocide. One of the examples is, look at mythologies like Ramayana and Mahabharata. You will see that the main reason why war took place in those epics is because of the humiliation that was
Hmm.
involved. And in same sort of analysis exists about rise of Nazism and World War II, where Germany's humiliation in the First World War, especially in the Versailles Accords, is attributed as a major reason for rise of Nazism and
World War II.
World War II. In the same way, another example that I'll give, that look at the speech that Osama bin Laden gave after attack on Twin Towers, 9/11 attacks. He says, what you are experiencing is the humiliation that our group has faced for last 80 years. So here we have a narrative which tells us that humiliation can lead to war, can lead to genocide, can lead to terrorism. But there is another set of literature which also tells you that humiliation is something that it makes you powerless. You feel, in a way, being humiliated is to be placed in a situation that you consider below yourself,
Hmm.
being treated less than human, being treated less competent, less worthy, is an experience of humiliation, constitutes an experience of humiliation. And that, in a sense, is disempowering because the other person has the power to define your quality and your possibility. So, how is this possible? On the one hand, uh, people are saying that humiliation leads to war, genocide, terrorism, and on the other hand, humiliation is also very much an outcome of inaction, inertia, uh, helplessness, powerlessness. So I try to understand the issue of humiliation in the lives of Dalits, and especially I try to focus on their everyday experience and their everyday resistance to humiliation, not looking at humiliation. My point is that it is not, uh, I think, helpful to imagine response to humiliation only in terms of these binary categories of violent action and complete inertia. There
Hmm.
is a middle ground that people uh, face on an everyday basis, where humiliation is a part of the everyday, and you try to negotiate those humiliating realities and you try to resist humiliation in numerous ways. So, what is important is to also understand how people make sense of humiliation. So, what I found was that Dalits report a sort of a formative experience of humiliation. They don't feel, in a sense, they didn't report any vengeance, any violent intention towards the perpetrators.
Hmm.
One of the things that was very clear is the struggle involved in making sense of something as humiliating. What they noted was that to make sense of something as humiliating is really a difficult task. It's not apparent all the time because it is made through so many uh, gestures, different ways people use words, and different ways you are treated and put in a situation. So making sense of humiliation involves struggle. Then communicating humiliation, that you are feeling humiliated and other person does not have any right to treat you in that way. What was really interesting was that Dalit participant did not report any response to the perpetrator when the humiliation was taking place. They did not say to they didn't report saying to the other person, no, you can't talk to me like that, you can't treat me like that. They, in fact, went through that humiliating experience,
Hmm.
uh, not in an obedient way, but still they went through that experience. But later on, they tried to make sense of that experience in different ways. They try to in a way question who they are, what is their position in the social world, what can be done to challenge these sort of humiliating instances. And what was very clear is that for Dalit participants, this experience of humiliation was a formative experience. It, in a way, made them aware of the reality of caste that exists in Indian society. So participants were saying that it was good that I was humiliated. I was ashamed of my caste. But now I know why I need to do something to eliminate caste from Indian society. So in the same way, people became uh, 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 people can become politically conscious after uh, experiencing humiliation. And another set of research that I have done, looking at Ambedkar's speeches of mobilizing, say, Mahar Satyagraha in 1927 and Dharmantar movement in 1935, uh, 36. It's very interesting that humiliation is a major element that was used to mobilize action by Ambedkar. by
Yeah.
telling people that you are also human beings, you also have the same rights. If people consider you Hindu, then they should treat you like all other Hindus. Otherwise, who are you? So, in a
Mm.
sense, humiliation was a very important element in mobilization in terms of uh, awakening people to their slavery,
Mhm.
uh, and but at the same time, the narratives of participants made it very clear that humiliation was also a tool of social control and was very much used to damage people, to hurt people. So I'm trying to understand the role of humiliation, not just for the minority group members, also that happens to be a primary focus, but also trying to also understand how humiliation might affect societies, might affect it, say, international relations, and so on. So that is one focus of my research. Another focus of my research is looking at uh, uh, various ways we can use social psychology to address critical issues in Indian society. So, with the help of various colleagues and students, I'm looking at uh, uh, primarily nowadays how our beliefs and attitude towards Ganges uh, uh, are constructed and how they, in fact, contain a sort of a paradox. On the one hand, we consider uh, Ganga River as mother, we call it Ganga Maya,
Mm.
and it's not just uh, uh, Ganga that is there in the north, but that sacred geography is very much replicated throughout India, and Ganga is an important holy entity for Indian people. But at the same time, we see a reality that millions of people are dependent on Ganga for their livelihood. And Ganga happens to be one of the most polluted rivers in the world. Do
Mm.
people then consider Ganga to be an perishable entity?
Mm.
Why something, an environmental resource that is considered as holy, is polluted to such an extent? How is that apparent contradiction between considering something as holy, pure, and then keep on polluting it actually takes place? How do you attribute, how do you make sense of these sort of paradox is what
Yeah.
I'm looking at with colleagues from Sweden. And we have this project. We in a way hampered by the pandemic, but we hope that we start with our field work soon. So that is one of the issues that is pertinent nowadays.